All right, welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Mark Nara. Mark, you're the host with you're the host of Tattoos with Intention podcast. You're also founder of Tattoo Pathway, and man, you sent me a message, and I jumped all over it because I love what you're doing. You're doing not only tattooing, which I'm into, but also kind of blending it with the spirituality side of things, and I'm really excited to hear about that. So, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks for jumping on the request.
Yeah,
It's nice to chat with someone who has tattoos and understands that there's more to it as well. So I'm sure
yeah,
we'll have some good stuff to dig into with your own tattoos. But yeah, like you said, I started Tattoo Pathway only just last year actually, and it's kind of been this culmination of I guess a deepening and a maturing and an exploration of what it is that as a tattooist I'm doing with people,
hmm
and also what the tattoos have done to myself, like when you flip the lens and you start having a look at your own story and journey. And that kicked off in about 2012. I'd already been tattooing for a while, maybe 5 or 6 years. Um, and then life changes, and a whole bunch of different things came and sort of disrupted the way my life looked and the way I thought about myself. And I started that journey, that excavation of who I was and what life was and all of those things. And yeah, tattooing came along in that excavation, and I've been unpacking it ever since. And it just seems like a never-ending rabbit hole
oh yeah,
in terms of like how tattooing, I guess the roots of it spread through and sort of really connect to so many different facets of who we are and how we experience the world and how the world experiences us, and all of the layers: physical, psychological, spiritual. So that's a little bit of a background on it. I'm happy to talk about any part of the story that you think will be relevant and where it goes. We can
oh,
talk
totally.
all the way back to sort of childhood. Life looked
Yeah,
very different then, but
let's
we'll try to
go.
keep it relevant to what you think your audience
Yeah,
would like to hear.
man, I don't care what
Yeah.
they think. I care what I think. And if they
Yeah.
happen to want to listen, let's go. Yeah, man,
Yeah.
tattooing is incredible. I didn't get my first tattoo until I was 27 years old. My brother was killed in a car
Huh?
accident when he was 30, and so he had a tribal tattoo on this shoulder. I did the similar thing, but most people can't see it. But if you're a
Mm.
tattoo artist, it's actually his name. It's Nolan McCoy, but it's all in tribal, and so not many people know that, but now more people know that. And that was
Yeah.
kind of my first one. 27 years old. I was kind of late to the game as far as some people. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I served in
Yeah.
the military.
Did you say that was your brother?
Yeah, my older brother. Yep. So I'm one of five
Wow.
kids. One of five kids. I'm the middle, and he was the oldest. And yeah, at 30 years old, was killed in a car accident, and that's sucked. But it encouraged me to get my first tattoo because it is kind of a healing thing. For me, it was healing. It was like now I have that part of my brother with me for the rest of my life. And so yeah, that was my first tattoo. And then I was in the military, and a bunch of dudes got our dog tags for whatever reason tattooed on us, and so a bunch of us,
Yeah.
I got that after well, I was still in the military for a while, but yeah, so I
Yeah.
got a,
Yeah.
a couple, and then yeah, I just
Yeah.
I,
Interesting, man. That first one. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
The memorial tattoo of your brother. It's a big one. I could feel the emotion that's there.
yeah,
Losing your big bro. That's huge, man.
it was
Mm.
devastating. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
2007. So he was 30, I was 27, so I'm 44 now. So you know, it's been a while, but it's still, it hits home every time. I look at it all the time and think of my brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. It's such an interesting thing. The that capacity that tattoos have to hold information,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from a point in time. So obviously getting a memorial tattoo is like quite a common thing.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people do that. And, you know, it's just like an innate thing that we do. You know, no one tells us that's what to do, but a lot of the time we do it because there's this act of acknowledgement. And something to reflect on, that I have in time doing it with people is whether it's holding something that is like pinning something there, or whether it's like letting something go, because it can kind of be used either way in terms of a charge and stuff, you know. So like when I've looked at older cultures that do something similar in a grieving process, whether it's a tattoo, there's like a lot of tattoos for deceased people in Sumba in Indonesia. When I spent time there, most of the tattoos were that, or these little symbols that they get around the time someone passed away. And then say in Australia here, I know like I can't pinpoint where exactly, because there's so many different sort of tribal nations in Australia, hundreds. But I know in some areas, like say the woman or the mother has a miscarriage or loses a child, in order to grieve, they'll actually like, I think, remove part of a finger or something.
Oh, wow.
So there's this physical, and I think it's the same with getting the tattoo too. There's this like physical letting go and giving away that happens, you know, whether it's like the actual physical removal, or like this bloodletting, because there's an energy there, and then that's like an action that's signifying it. And so I'm saying this because with all tattoos, there seems to be sometimes this innate catalyst to get something tattooed, and then the charge of it can be kind of used in a way that's like the opposite to what we think, which is that, like, say with a memorial tattoo, you might carry something with you, opposed to letting something go. And it's just a reframe that can happen, but like physically the action of doing it will be the thing that sort of like makes it stick for that point in time. You know what I mean? So when I'm working with people, a lot of the time it's like their existing tattoos will come in, and understanding the story, so that the next time you get tattooed, or the next time you open the body up, there's that reframe, or that different lens comes in, and kind of can shift the whole story a fair bit in the next step of the journey, you know, because they're all connected, so to speak. So yeah, it's an interesting one. And then you've got other work around that tattoo that you,
buddy, those are too. So I was going to mention that you were talking about when they lose a child or something like that, and my wife, you know, we tried to conceive for years and years and years, and had a baby that we thought was gonna make it, and she ended up losing it, and ended up getting a big old memorial tattoo for her, and that was her first tattoo. So I just wanted to hit that real quick before I move on. So yeah, these I mean, this is kind of wild stuff. Most of this has all been done since December, and I'll show it to the camera, but the mic is probably won't pick me up. But so kind of wild. I did so I was in the military, and suffered from, you know, some quite a bit of PTSD and stuff. And then last year in December, and I've told the story a couple of times now, but I went down to Costa Rica and did ayahuasca, and it's for healing, and it was a 4-night journey. And basically these tattoos that I have on the sleeve are each different night. So the crazy shit I saw, or the healing stuff I saw, one of the baby that this is a wild story. So during one of the ceremonies, we were going to name this baby Stella Rose, and during one of the ceremonies, I'm laying there deep in the medicine, and I'm looking at the edge of my mattress that I'm on, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And it's a little red spot. And I was like, what is that? And you know, deep in the medicine, and I grab it, and it was a rose petal, and it was the fucking weirdest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And it was a real rose petal, and we're in a Maloka. There's no rose bushes in there. It was wild shit, and I'm like it hit me like a ton of bricks that, oh my God, it's my unborn daughter, Stella Rose, and so that's what that's what this one's all about. And then on on the ceiling of the Maloka during the ceremony, they light candles, and there's some rafters, and uh, plain as day, there's a praying mantis that can appear on the ceiling of the Maloka in there. So I figured, well, I better put that on there as well. And I have kind of a tree here, and I'll pull it up a little closer so people can kind of see some of this. But yeah,
That other camera you had going at the start worked really well too.
yeah,
To see
yeah.
it?
I'll turn that on. So I got this guy.
it's
I mean,
really
this
clear.
is, um, it's, I don't know. It's just me giving myself to the universe or God, or,
Cosmos.
and then, unfortunately for this one, that was kind of that was the last night of my journey. And I thought I had all the healing in the world that I needed. And so I was like, man, I sure would like to get beamed up by a UFO just for shits and giggles. And, boy, they showed up, and it was the wildest shit I've ever experienced. And I would highly recommend not asking for that experience if if you're ever under ayahuasca. But it was badass, and so there it is. Now I'm the weirdo.
What
with
was that like? Just out of interest,
UFO.
because there's a few things I want to go to in your tattoos that I think
Yeah,
are,
for
are
sure.
good parts. But
Yeah.
what was the UFO thing like?
Oh man. So I mean, it was the last night of the ceremony. They do Yahe night, and my previous 3 nights had been really really profound in life. I got basically all the answers I thought I needed. And so I took it and went and laid down, and it should last, it should be a while before this stuff kicks in. And boy, it hit me like a ton of bricks. But right before that, I'm laying on my mattress looking at the stars out this window, and I'm like, I had all the healing I need, so sure would like to get beamed up by a UFO. I grew up listening to a radio program called Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, and it's kind of a sci-fi thing, and so I've always been like, man, kind of interested in the universe and all that stuff. And so I was like, yeah, shit, beam me up, man. And boy, my entire body, all of a sudden, I had my eyes closed, and just my entire body just started buzzing like a trillion bees were in my head. My body was completely numb, and I just started leaving my body. And there was all this geometry and stuff, like green and red geometry, just perfect, just going everywhere. And I like go through it, and all of a sudden I start heading to this bright light, and it is the brightest, scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. But it wasn't like the sun. It was like all knowledge, it was like a mind glowing with energy. And and I'm going to it, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to fucking die. Like that's what I thought was happening. Like I started kind of panicking. I'm like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I'm thinking of my kids, because now I have a son and a daughter who are 5 and 3. And I started thinking of them. I'm like, I want to live, man. And so there was a guy, Johnny Messner, who works down there, and I was like, hey man, you got any advice for me? Because I rode with him in on the shuttle to the retreat. And he's like, yeah, man, if you've gone too far, just remember your breath. And so I just started sucking air, and all of a sudden I'm like, I can feel my hand, and so I can feel myself hanging onto the mattress, and I'm sucking air, and wham, I come right back to my body, but I'm still just full blown in the medicine, and the story goes on and on and on. It was a wild experience, man. I ended up screaming, I need help, and got hauled outside and smoked by all the shamans, and they healed me. They brought me back, buddy. But it was wild. So I never actually saw any
so
UFOs.
Interesting. Yeah, but like you called it in.
Yeah.
And they beamed you up.
Oh, they did.
And then you kind of pulled the ripcord.
I did.
By the sounds of it.
I'm curious. I don't know what would have happened if I stuck with it. Maybe I would have had the greatest moment of my life. I don't know.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I wonder who you called in.
I don't know.
Because there's,
yeah.
That's what I was asking. I was like, I wonder who you ended up with there.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways it could have gone, right?
I can tell you the end of the end of my night, I know who I called in, and it was God and the angels and Jesus. And buddy, I mean, I had a full-blown conversation with Jesus didn't talk to me too much. I yelled at him a few times and asked him, what's the point of all this? And finally he answered me and said, it's the human experience, and walked off. I was like, fuck, he's right. So
funny.
A little wild.
Yeah, interesting, man. Interesting. Yeah, it's such a complex space to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
These like sort of intermediary layers between where we are and this sort of like God point, this unfathomable point, because obviously there's so many layers to it, right? Lots of intermediary beings and even just the stories and the different thought concepts. So I always find it fascinating. I had one teacher that I talk about a lot who's Native American, and he talked about there being 3 sort of starseed nations, that came and sort of like, I guess, started the whole human genetic thing that was happening here. Very different.
I want to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just different ways to approach it, and then it's like there's the creation story. When we start looking at the Abrahamic side of things, which I think there's so much in that, and then the evolutionary, and then all the different indigenous mythologies. There's so many different layers, right? But recently, like hearing you're like a Jesus man and God man, and me too.
Yeah.
I just I'm not as like on as a narrow a path as a lot of Christians I know. But I'm totally on that path, and I'm with them, listening and talking and going into it, because it's like just so real.
Yeah.
But my mind always sort of wanders and experiences more.
I'm right there with you. And I believe in God, and I believe in Jesus 1,000,000%. Talk to the guy, but I think there's a lot more going on than most people. I know there's a lot more going on than most people kind of understand. And I feel like most religions, there's, thousands of religions, and all of them kind of have very similar, stories. And so they're all pulling that knowledge from somewhere. And, so but I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but I also believe in UFOs and aliens. So I'm all over the place.
Well, this link between the two that I was going to see if you've checked out before is like, have you seen Dr. Michael Heiser?
I have not, no.
He passed away, I think, last year or the year before, but you'd get a lot out of it. He did one book that was it might be called something really cliche, like Angels and Demons, or Aliens and Angels, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But this guy, he was like an extremely deep thinking intellectual within the biblical realm, like studied as a theologist and all those sorts of things. And he was also a UFO enthusiast.
Yeah.
And so he's from this like Christian lens. And then he'd go to like UFO conferences, and he'd have the most profound conversations there. But he looks at all of these really interesting links. And one of the papers is like the crossover in experience. So the correlation in experience between like satanic ritual and UFO abduction. And he draws all of these links, which are like, it's profound. It's a profound one to read through. which is one of the, like, you know, having dug into a lot of this stuff for a long time, it's one of the reasons where it's like all of my work and connection and prayer and I guess like alignment is like there is no intermediary layer that I don't want to deal with anymore, because it's like there's a full spectrum there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like acknowledging that there's a spectrum, and then acknowledging it's like probably don't have the full story or the understanding, or even just like what might have existed in times past, maybe still does, but I don't have access to like the eldership or something to appropriately navigate that, you know. So it's like any prayer I put out's going straight through all of those layers to
Yeah. Just go to
the
big man.
emails got no one CC'd in.
Yeah. That's probably the
Straight
right
to the
move.
OG.
Yeah.
That's
the
straight to
move.
the OG, you know.
Have you ever
But
experienced
that's
any
fascinating, man.
have you ever experienced any psychedelics?
Yep. So I had a similar experience to your beam me up.
Uh-huh.
The first time I used dimethyltryptamine, which was a long time ago, prior to being a dad, prior to like, it was one of the disruptors to my life. And I say disruptor and it sounds negative, but it was also an amplification, because it was like, it changes everything.
Yep.
But it was scary. You know, like I had that fear that you had. It was like, I'm going to die. I'm going through a tunnel. There's geometry everywhere. And I can see the tunnel's going somewhere. And there's me going like, I've got no body. I've got no concept of time. What about my partner? What about my parents? This is, you know, I'm going somewhere else.
You are going somewhere else.
And I'm not, and it's not Mark in his body going somewhere. It's like the essence of my being,
it's Mark's
which
soul.
is non-physical, is left the building.
Yeah.
So I had a similar thing, and I remember, you know, it's kind of like time doesn't exist. That's why you're freaking out.
Yeah.
And when I sort of came back through, I think 1 minute had passed.
Seemed like a year.
Just like, you know, infinite time.
Yeah.
You think you're stuck. That's why you go into that, like, am I dying? It's not like a thought, am I dying? It's an experience of like, is this death?
I'm dead. Yeah.
Is this that process? So I've had that. I've also had, you know, staying in that same realm with that teacher, when he put me out to do Vision Quest, which is one of their pathways. The first time, this painting here on the background, that was on the back of that experience, which is like 4 days of fasting and prayer and whatever within their sort of container. Like you talked about the medicine container you were in. This is like sober, but you're in a very orchestrated container as well. You know, you have like a holy man sort of conducting it, setting up the energetic
that looks
architecture of what you're in.
That looks like an ayahuasca experience, you know, what you're seeing back there. You see some stuff like that.
Yeah, so I literally just scribbled it down on paper. Like when I was out there, I wasn't doing much, but, you know, I sort of just like scribbled something like this, you know, real simple. and then sort of like painted
everything to you.
Because, well, on the back of it, you know, because it's like I'm having this experience with something on the boundary of the circle I'm in, medicine circle. That's wanting to interact, and I guess is kind of like responding to what it is that I'm putting out as my intention to be there. But anyway, I did that, and my teacher that put me out was like, "Oh, it looks like something from his culture that they call kachinas." And then, but then at the same time, where we were, which is Australian ceremonial ground, there's petroglyphs, there's like rock carvings, thousands of years old, that have similar shapes as well, and they have different terminology for this thing. And so this is like the complexity that I'm talking about in these spaces, and going like, well, I don't really know. I have a knowing now that allows me to acknowledge something viscerally lived. So there's like no doubt there that there's these sort of layers to the story and to the experience. But there's also this like humbling and humility in that of like, well, I don't need to like make up some story that I know what's what or be right about any of it. You know? But there's something beyond that, obviously, that everything's sort of being divinely coordinated by, you know, and that gives like a big sense of peace in terms of navigating things too. It sort of removes a lot of those layers when you understand that relationship is the paramount, it's the ultimate.
Yeah, it's
And so that, like,
definitely
my focus will go there.
it's definitely like you said, it's like kind of a path and it's laid out. And I mean, so for me, like doing psychedelics, and I really, it's only been a year. I've done it 13 times, but I really I did it for the healing, not because I just wanted to go trip. And then once I had that experience, I was like, man, there's more I want to learn. But if I could do some of this stuff without the doing like what you're talking about, where it's actually a sober experience, but you're kind of still having these same spiritual journeys and stuff like that. That's very interesting to me. I haven't looked into any of that.
Yeah. I mean, it takes time for things to unpack. So if it's been a year for yourself, it's like, yeah, you're sort of cracking things open.
Mhm.
So I think, I started trying a bunch of things in that year that I used DMT. The thing that led me there was doing just meditation. It was like no psychedelics, but becoming aware of like these sort of real shadowy layers of myself that were coming out through alcohol and cannabis and stuff, and partying and telling myself lies. And, and this is like going back over 12 years or so, right? But these things that happened that made me go like, okay, I should meditate, pay more attention, unpack stuff. And then that led me into like, trying something like DMT. And then that opened up things like, other psychedelic experiences. And then like, oh, maybe I shouldn't just do this in someone's living room. Maybe I should do it within a culture that understands these medicines. So, then experiencing things like ayahuasca and whatever.
Yeah.
All those years back. But then again, keeping that prayer really strong of like, well, what am I doing? What's the whole orientation and intention of this? It's like, I actually want to get to a place where I have a really firm and familiar and instilled experience of who I am and what that's in connection to as something greater, and how that influences everything, and like why we're here. Like you said, JC told you, it's like to have the human experience. It's like, okay, cool. So what is that? But like, is it a playground? Is it a classroom? What comes next? All of those sorts of layers. And in that intentional pursuit, then things start coming to you in terms of like agent and arena and feedback on the in the field and on the quest you're on, which is how that teacher came in, and then it's like, okay, cool, maybe this sort of a pathway to come into a place that was like very, very sober and extremely psychedelic. And that sort of lands and sits with you in a very different way, like an extremely different way. And you're in the States, hey?
Yeah. So I went down to Costa Rica, so I'm legal. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're living in the States, so it's like, I don't know what it'd be like navigating it there or orchestrating it, but it's like that's where Vision Quest comes from. Getting in the sweat lodge or doing those pathways. Yeah.
Oh man, I'll have to check it out because going to Costa Rica a couple times a year is not cheap.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you some stuff about your tattoos? Because
yeah, absolutely.
That's where we started.
I got a couple more. I got this one here. My brother had this. It's like a Chinese or Japanese power symbol.
Right.
It's a dime a dozen in the States. Everybody's got it, but he had it, so I added that on. And then I got my kids' initials up here. So it's just AJM, Alec Joaquin McCoy, and Ayla June McCoy. We kept the initials the same, so I didn't have to get another tattoo. So
yeah.
I got this one when my son was born. So yeah. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm going to be adding a few more things, definitely.
Would you be open to me sort of sharing some, I guess, reflection on your tattoos and stuff, and maybe
100%.
seeing if that's like useful for you?
Yeah. Yep.
So like the tattoos, obviously, like you said, you're going to add to them. They're not balanced yet, right? So it's
not
like one arm's
really
very full.
Yeah.
One arm's very full, one arm's not. So like when I'm working with somebody, I'll always look at this sort of overall picture, like there's just one thing that we're working on, and balance and harmony being an important part of that, because the canvas we're working on is balanced and harmonious, right? So like as people, we are, you know, and we're working into that material with the tattoo. It's like it's something that works with that, you know, so as opposed to like being pinned on and separate to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's actually meant to be something that's so merged with you that it feel, you might already have this type of feeling where it's like you couldn't imagine not having the tattoos, right?
Yeah, kind of now.
Yeah. And like that's the point of it. It's meant to be this thing that grows with you as you grow, right? And so on that, a lot of the times, like I said, with some tattoos that might hold something, it's like as you grow, you could be holding something that, you know, in time, as part of that process, you're bringing it with you. You're carrying this information with you because it's relevant, and you're making something that like in that moment was relevant, and you're bringing it into the future so that its relevance can be looked at and reflected on at some future point. You know, and so a lot of the time, as we take that next step, the more aware we become of what we're doing, what we're working on with the tattoo, opposed to individual tattoos. You need to sort of go back and unlock some of these things, especially if there's something that no longer aligns with you. So like listening to your tattoos, most of them, it's like there's something that's so intrinsic to who you are, family and stuff, which they should be. That's really important. That you're not gonna have to change them. Like I said, there might be like a reflection of like, okay, say with Stella Rose or with Nolan, was it your brother?
Nolan, yeah.
Nolan. One of those, it might be like, because there's still charge there, it might be that there's some sort of like acknowledging it as a charge and letting it out at another stage, or even like with your wife's one. For example, one of our friends, when we first fell pregnant, me and my wife, 7 years ago, we had friends that fell pregnant at the same time, and we went through the pregnancy journey, and then they, you know, had a stillborn at full term, you know, and we're really close and we love them, and I did a similar thing for them, like tattoos at that point in time. Only recently, 7 years on, that friend has reached out. They live in, you know, different states and stuff, and like, hey, I think it's time to do some work. Actually, they were like, you know, I think, because they've got kids now too, you know, I think we were like reflecting on where our kids are at and whatever, and I think so much is like water's under the bridge. I've got to this place where I think I've finally processed that, like that process is done. And I'll bring this in just because it's interesting. She was like thinking about what to, you know, what to do next with her, I guess, this change and transition and awareness of that. And she actually had the teacher that put me out on that vision quest turn up to her in her, I guess, meditative space. It was like, you know, reach out to Mark and help you with some things. And we did that. I pointed her in the direction of a few things. But the thing that came in for me was like, her tattoo, it's kind of time to open that little time capsule again. So like the tattoo that we did, in my mind, straight away, my attention was there. It's like, okay, maybe that tattoo will grow or change a bit or whatever. And so that we like open the record that's there. So that it can be reassessed and sort of like recoded a little bit and closed again, because that process is done, you know? So there could be a bit of that, because I felt some charge there in those tattoos. The other thing that might be there, and I don't know the story of it, but the dog tags, which you moved over, it sounds like that was a very different time and version of you.
It was completely different. And I mean, some of my buddies, we all have the same tattoo, but that was a different, I'm actually not proud of these really. And I love veterans and I am a veteran, but you know, I served in Iraq and I have a very different opinion of that war than I did right after coming back, you know. To get political, that was bullshit. We should have never been over there. And I was part of that. And so I don't know if I'll ever cover it up because it's just kind of part of who I was, but maybe I do, you know.
Sure. And so this is part of, like, again, when I'm guiding someone through a process, a lot of it's reflecting and fully understanding the story that you currently have, because you're wearing it and carrying it. And so, like, is it something that's supportive that moves you forward, or is it something that's kind of like limiting and binding you? And it can be as simple as, like with the memorial one, a reframe and an acknowledgement at the next step can change the charge, so to speak. Other tattoos need to be buried. This is where, like, cover-ups or changes, that it might not be something that accurately represents you on a real physical level, right? And only you can know that. It's not like, okay, you're not a soldier, so the dog tag doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
It's not as clear cut as that. It's you reflecting, going like, actually, it does or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, interestingly, like you talked about some like PTSD stuff that comes out of those experiences, right?
Oh yeah.
With tattooing, when people get tattoos that are like really fixed to who they think they are at a point in time, and then they go through massive changes, the tattoo can bind them to an identity or a version of themselves that's really misaligned and can cause issues psychologically, in terms of how they view themselves, physically, how people view them in the world. Like, let's say you're a gangster and you get like your mob tattoo across your forehead, and then that's not you anymore. It's going to play out for a while in terms of your experience, right? And so I label that PTID. So it's post-tattoo identity disorder, which I'm putting in like in a text that I'm working on at the moment. But it's very obvious. And so, like, there is something that's happening. There's a disorder. There's a disharmony in your identity and how you're presenting yourself and how you feel about yourself. Like, you'll feel it. Like you said, I'm not proud of this. It's like, do you want to be carrying something that you're not proud of? Do you want to, like, not be proud of a part of yourself? And so when it's usually, that would be an indicator for me, like, okay, maybe a burial needs to happen there, because it's a part of you that no longer represents you, but you can reflect on in a burial. So, like, this is like, if we look at showing respect and honoring history that got you to where you are, it's like, cool, I can let go of that version of myself. It's dead. It doesn't exist anymore, actually, right? So I can put it to rest. And then the tattoo that covers that becomes an acknowledgement of that part of you. And that's a really significant part of the landscape. It's like, that's where something's buried. It's significant.
Like
but it's done in a way that's like respectful of it and allows you to move on. And that'll probably happen, like you said, as you get more stuff done. You're going to work on getting your arms balanced. Like, if you were to sit there and not look at your tattoos and just try and feel the imprint of your tattoos on your arms right now, your arm with all of the sleeve done is probably going to feel a lot heavier.
Yeah.
You'll be a lot more aware of this surface layer of that skin than your other arm.
Yeah.
So that's the balance thing. So when you become aware of that, it's like there's going to be a natural sort of progress to want to have them balanced, And so I just thought I'd share that, because it's like, it's just a way to approach them, way to approach what you got coming up.
Well, I think my artist is going to love this episode. We follow each other on Instagram, and
Oh, no.
I just found him recently. Yeah, he does good work. I appreciate him, but yeah, I haven't really ever thought about covering it up, but I do look at it and I'm kind of, it's not who I am, So, man, is it hard to cover up tattoos? I know they could do it, but I've never had one covered up.
Yeah, it depends who's doing it. It's like, I can give these layers of sort of direction with people and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm not working with the person, how it plays out, it's kind of like super random.
I got to fly out to Australia.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of people in the States, I'm sure, but depending on who you land with and their, I guess, capacity to meet what you're there for, is a bit of it, because it's like, it's a visual language tattooing. It is information, so it's like you kind of want to be working with someone that has that angle. So they're, they're screening you and your story and reading and trying to make the visual thing work. They're not stuck in trying to make it look cool or do an artwork or get a photo.
So I wrote out every single night of my ayahuasca experience, and I sent it to him, and he read through all of them and came up with this stuff. The only one I'm kind of like, over here is like, I might ditch the UFO. I don't know. I don't want my kids. They're in kindergarten now. It's like, oh, has your dad got beamed up yet? But it means, it's meaningful, but it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I also have kids and I don't want them to get poked fun at if their dad's a weirdo.
There's always the potential for things to grow and change, Again, that's the value of it. You get to sort of reflect and go like, okay, what was I thinking there? It's valuable to do that, I think, opposed to just accepting it and kind of putting it on the shelf, which is a lot of people. So many people get tattooed and it's like, well, I made that choice and that's it. And I'll just, deal with it. And I think that's tapping out on what the tattoos are kind of calling you to do and what life's calling you to do. That person's probably tapped out on life as well, maybe, just want to sort of like have the comforts and get through, opposed to continue to meet what's happening, the growth and the change and stuff, right? What we're here for.
So what's your, I love what you're talking about, man. This is my jam. So it's been a while, I talked to some interesting people, but this is right in alignment with what I like to chat about. What your tattoo pathway, what are you doing with that?
So pretty much it's like, by looking at my own tattoos, like I said at the start, and what I was doing, starting to see patterns, and going like, okay, so what are the problems, or like, what are the roots of the things that aren't optimal in my tattoos? So like how I'm functioning, like what's my pattern of receiving tattoos, and unpacking it, and then allowing me to do that with people. Like, what's their pattern? What are they thinking? And so I started going like, all right, there's patterns that are the individual's pattern. This is what they think about themselves. This is how they're functioning. It might come from this or that, or, and which of those is true and real and good, like putting them on a path of betterment, something that's worth locking in, or something that's not, because each one you can go a degree in one or the other direction, right? The dial goes this way and you want a better track this way on one that's not. So I started to sort of take notice of that. And then beyond the individual, I started noticing a lot of it's not the individual. A lot of it's the program of the industry, or the contemporary tattoo culture. So there's this bigger picture too. And I was like, all right, so tattooing as its own living system that everyone's in, almost like an entity, the entity of tattooing. There's a certain pattern to it, and a certain prescription program that everyone runs. This is what a tattoo is. This is how you get it. This is what you do. This is what it does. And that was actually quite limited compared to what I was starting to uncover. It's like, actually, they're all connected. You can't just go and get one tattoo. It's like saying, like your finger's separate to your hand is separate to your arm. It's not true, right? It's one thing, like if you use like a vehicle analogy, it's like the wheel and the mirror or the muffler. It's like they're not different. It's a car, right? And so it's the same with the tattoos. It's a tattoo. It's one tattoo. It's like you got one body, and every time you work on it, you're working on that tattoo. It's one system on you, that you're intentionally working on, right? So it needs to make sense and be coherent. And a lot of the time it's not. It's kind of like what we were just talking about. And so I've been on this process of reflecting on all the tattoos I have, stringing them together, and then working out how to move forward in a way that system becomes healthy. The tattoo story becomes healthy. The narrative, the picture, the depiction of me, who I am. So the tattoo pathway is a result of all of this stuff I've been doing, working with people, working on myself, running courses, getting these ideas out and teaching them and getting feedback. And we've ended in this place where Tattoo Pathway, we're focused on education and research around tattooing, so we can continue to like formulate this picture of what the contemporary tattoo culture is, with the intention of giving back, to people, the culture of man, because we're so globalized, a structured pathway, some guidance.
Are you?
So it's not just tattooing anymore, right?
Are you working with mainly artists or just people who get tattoos, or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Whoever comes into my field, really.
Nice.
So it's like, last year I was having lots of conversations, and I guess for a long time I've been having lots of conversations with people that are from a culture that doesn't have the contemporary lens, because it's like that lens is only 200-300 years old. Tattooing is really old.
Yeah.
So looking at how it's being used has been a big part of it, and trying the best I can from being part of this contemporary culture to understand that. And so where we were talking at the start, it's a big part. It's like that lens where tattooing's come from is a lens where the world's highly supernatural and your experience is highly supernatural. So already it's like the contemporary tattoo field's like, it's just ink in the skin.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so.
Nothing. There's no meaning.
Yeah.
Like, well, actually,
I've seen some meaningless tattoos, but
sure.
Yeah.
But as soon as you have that lens, Tim, where it's like everything's connected, everything's related at this energetic and spiritual level, then those tattoos and the people that are getting tattoos in a way that's meaningless, it's still hopelessly enmeshed with their soul's path. So it's just this internal place that they're in, externally being represented, that their life has no meaning. And so again, it's those breadcrumbs for the person, when the timing is right for them, can give them some access to like, oh, at that point in time, this is how I felt about myself in the world. Okay, do I want to use that? So Tattoo Pathway is a lot of that.
Sorry about that. I was wondering, man, obviously you got tats. Can you kind of go over a couple of yours and kind of the meaning behind them? I'm curious.
Sure.
I mean, obviously we got the main guy right here, and then man, you're all hooked up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty heavily tattooed, and I got most of my tattoos not running the framework I have now. So probably a good 8 years of getting tattooed in this direction that didn't have the layers of awareness I have now. And so I'm sort of trying to course correct, which is the whole concept of the Tattoo Pathway, so I can run through some of mine and explain it. But, so like even just my sleeves, which are beautiful artworks. They're Japanese, 2 Japanese sleeves.
Wow.
There's Japanese kites on them that have different images.
Oh yeah.
They're both got water and rocks and cherry blossoms. One side has cranes, the other side has turtles. They're these complementary opposites, heaven and earth type of thing in the Japanese motifs. So there was a layer of being lucky when I was learning to tattoo. When I got my sleeves done, I was like looking for the best technical artists.
Yeah.
And the Japanese aesthetics already very refined. And I landed with a practitioner, Josh, who intellectually understood the Japanese aesthetic really well in the culture. So he could do things that made sense visually within that style. I'm not Japanese though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's this layer, is like, it made sense because it's like, oh, the tattoo culture, Japanese is a style of tattooing, and
Yeah.
But it was, when I reflect, I'm like, I was just getting the tattoo uniform.
Yeah.
Like all the good tattooists have these like tattoos in these styles, and the styles that the like most proficient tattooists are doing are these particular styles that are timeless and look good and work good. But it's a product and it's an artwork, and it's so this like 10 years of getting my sleeves done. I was learning to become a technically proficient tattooer, so that was my goal. You know, like I want to be the best tattooist. And so there's layers of meaning that retrospectively I can look at, and I'm thankful that I didn't just get bombed with stuff. That I had someone guiding me in a way that was good. And I can go like, okay, cool. There's lots of ability to reframe. And there's also like, it represents to me the ease that someone can move into tattooing in a way that it's not coherent with who they are. You know, it's coherent with the global tattoo culture. No one thinks twice about it, but there is something that's not exactly right. Whereas my legs, earlier tattoos I got, they were getting bombed with like the immature engagement with tattooing that was no guidance, the kind of like free reign, get whatever you want.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my legs are in this process of the burial thing that I was talking to you about. My legs are going to end up being like very, like almost black, big panels, a few windows in them. And so I'm in this process of doing that, you know, coming to my own conclusion around like, okay, there's tattoos that really misrepresent me, are kind of like holding me. And there's like this energetic tether, right? You might be aware of this stuff. It's like you can have cords that connect you to different things through time, different people, different ideas. And so it's like this cord, which I call like the bungee cord, what I've experienced is like tattoos can bind you to a version of yourself or other people, like if they're a shared tattoo or whatever, which can limit your movement and growth. And so you need to be aware of them and be able to go through this process. So when I did that, I started to cover these tattoos, initially myself from my ankles. I'm thinking of jumping on the table to show you, but maybe I just take the camera. I'm going to take my Ugg boots off.
Uh-oh. Nice. I just
so you can see these sort of black zones.
Yeah.
I'm like covering things, right? That was me moving into it. But then at the same time, to sort of double down on stuff we've been talking about, there's me going like, okay, but I'm navigating this thing and I don't have all the answers. I'm like a mad scientist right now. You know? Who has more answers for me?
Yeah.
You know, and so what it actually led me to do is I went to New Zealand. I reached out to an artist in New Zealand that's like similar age and in this process of tattooing, but from a cultural background. You know, he's got this lineage that is unbroken from where the tattoo ancestry comes from. Oh, wow. Some of the oldest cultures and what they were doing, right? So he's tattooing by hand using traditional tools and sort of under ceremony and stuff.
So where they hammer
again, there's me like, well, I'm not. Yeah, tapping. Again, that's not me though, right? So I have this layer of awareness that's like kind of like with the Japanese. I'm not Japanese. I'm also not Maori, but sort of equally to how I was approaching the sleeves, like I'm here to learn this thing and I want to do it right. So I'm coming to the person that knows it so that hopefully there's some type of like transmission that is appropriate in whatever way that it will feed into what I'm doing. So like I had that technically. This was huge for that, you know. And so I'm in this process now with, I'll show you my hips and legs.
Oh, man.
This is all happening, which is going down and meeting the ankles. And in that process, we're bearing a whole bunch of tattoos that are requiring a lot of me to dig into and unpack, right? So it's been a big process. And so I'm there and in this process of having these tattoos, I guess, revisited, like we said with yours, like undoing these or reopening these time capsules almost of information and reflecting and allowing like a rewriting and a process to happen. It's profound, you know. It's really making me have to do the work, dig deep, understand things, ask questions and grow. I'm having to really grow. There's like there's like a requirement or a cost of me now in this process of like not just getting tattooed,
Mm-hmm.
now getting tattooed on a pathway where everything's interconnected and I'm kind of working with it. You know, I'm working with this process, and I'm getting a clearer picture of what it's about.
Yeah.
And trying to bring that into the contemporary culture, trying to establish a little bit of a pathway or a route or some guidance and some perimeter that if people choose to get tattooed in that way, it's supportive of them. You know, it floats, it works, opposed to just getting smashed by the, you know, the mainstream or trying to carve your own way out, you know. So
Man,
yeah,
what
that's
you're
kind of where
doing
my
is
tattoo path's
incredible.
at. Yeah, that's where it's at the moment. So
you're
hopefully
a
I make
beast,
it
because
through.
that's the thing. I'm sitting here looking at that, and just this was, for me, it was brutal. I'm like, this, you know, I'm doing 4 or 5 hour sessions, but it hurts like a motherfucker. So you just you know, thank your higher power for the opportunity to get this art, and just close your eyes and go for it. Or how do you
Yeah,
deal with it?
it's like I'm kind of just in the ride now. Hey, I'm in the slippery dip
Yeah.
of it. So there's like lots of moments where, especially over in New Zealand, it's like their layers of reverence, as humble as it is, they're very humble. There's no like no bells and whistles, or there's no performance like you might get in what's happening in the contemporary tattoo culture, especially in Australia. Is there's lots of performance, there's lots of like theatrical displays to try and emulate the significance of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, again, like if you, as soon as you have the lenses, you're like, hang on, they're just doing the same thing with different
Smoke and
costume on, a
mirrors.
different
Yeah.
wrapper. Yeah, different wrapper, you know. So as much as it's like I'm going into these spaces that really understand it, they're very humble. And so I'm also trying to not think I know what's going to happen or what I'm doing when I'm there. I'm just sort of like trying to be present and pay attention. But yeah, it's like, again, I'm going like, cool. I know I'm connecting to that sort of source point, to the creator, acknowledging that there's all of these other layers and they have their place and things are the way that they're meant to be. But yeah, the very last session I've had, so they're all kind of different. All the sessions are different, kind of like any journey you go on, man. You know, you said you've done like 16, 13 journeys now. It's like, you don't know what you're going to get.
No, they've all been different too. And you know, some
Don't know.
have been
It's so,
wonderful, some have been extremely hard, but they've all, I believe, brought me to a better place. And you know, but you know, I like anybody, I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and so you know, it's just sweeping that, you know, cleaning that stuff up, and every journey has been better than the last. I don't think it's something I'll do forever by any means. And shit, I might have already had my last journey. I don't know. You know, I feel good, you know, so we'll see.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful. That's the thing. I think each medicine kind of has its way with you, you know, and you got to work on that, whatever that relationship is. And I've definitely learned to like acknowledge that I don't know when
Yeah.
the last time will be or whatever, and that it's probably lifelong, you know. Becoming more aware of the, like, a big thing for me is becoming more aware of the timing, opposed to just like just getting tattooed because I want to, or an idea, or I'm more going like, okay, I'm going to continue to get tattooed. It's like kind of lifelong process, regardless of if I get my whole body done or it ends at sort of the finish line of a project that I'm working on. And I'm just trying to like lean into the sensation of like when is it the real, like the appropriate time? Like when is it ripe to go into that and really, you know, receive or let go or whatever it is, by just paying attention to it. And so it's always different. Like you said, with your journey, it's always different. So for me, every time I'm in there, it's different. So sometimes I'm in there and it's like really hard and I'm really in my head. Other times I'm there and it's like, and I'm really in my body. The last time I was there, on the second day, because I'm having to travel, I sort of try and maximize the time, and there's usually big gaps in between sessions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I might not get tattooed. I think it's been 2 or 3 years already since my last session.
Oh, wow.
So it's like I go over and I try and maximize, try and like go hard when I'm there. So I get like 2 days, and in the last session, we were like blacking out my kneecap, and they're like, so they're doing it with he's doing it with his tools, and not trying to like devalue what they are, because they're highly significant tools. It's like a technology there, but they're sticks. They're sticks with sharp bones on them.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm getting my knees slapped.
Yeah, I think
it was very sharp, a very sharp sensation, and it cracked me open pretty hard. And I was definitely in some very deep prayer and reverence at that point.
Yeah, and that's probably the right way to handle it. But I know there's some people like in the States who are they're getting knocked out and then getting these full body sleeves under anesthesia. I'm like, what the hell's I mean, maybe you could balance the two. You could get the
the balance is the thing. I look at where I'm going with it, right? And understanding that like the opposites are always going to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the more I go into this layer of, I guess, substantiating what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Substantiating what's happening and sort of like trying to elevate it into this space that's like sacred. And the more I'm watching it go the other way too, and I'm like, wow, people are turning it into like they're just spitting on the whole situation. And the people that are going under anesthetic and getting a body done, like I said, with the sort of slow burn that I'm taking with my process now and seeing how important that is for it to actually integrate with my life.
Mm-hmm. Like,
so each step providing value that's applicable. So I'm growing with it.
Mm-hmm.
I watch some people, I'm like, man, they're going to be so blown out. They're not going to know who they are for the next 20 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's going to take them a very long time to catch up with that, and hopefully no one dies as a result of it.
But hopefully. Yeah, don't do it in a garage somewhere. Yeah. Mark, what am I missing, man?
I don't know.
I don't know. As far as I'm having a great time. I don't want to burn up your whole day. And this conversation's been freaking awesome. And I don't want to, take away from anything if I'm missing anything or.
No, not at all. I mean, look, I'm really enjoying the chat as well. I think people will find a lot of it useful. I'm happy to jump on again too.
For sure. I would love to
wrap it up for people so there's not too much there. And regarding how it's received, and if you have any questions and stuff, we just jump on to another one.
I think this will be a banger, man. It's a good one, and I love this conversation. But yeah, I try to keep them about an hour and 15, because I can watch the algorithm. But I'm like, hey, keep watching.
Sounds good. Well, I guess the only thing I put out is like, if anyone is watching and has questions or finds it interesting, the tattoo pathway for this year. So for 2025, we're launching the community on the 1st of Feb.
Awesome. What's your website?
Got an online space. It's tattoopathway.com.
Okay.
And you click walk the path. There's like, what's included in the community, which will probably be a pretty small group, but everyone's sort of doing this thing we're talking about. Everyone's unpacking their tattoos, and there's a bit of a rhythm to it so that you can, if you're going to get tattooed this year, you're sort of on this path and you're processing it with this group of people. You can do it individually too, but there's just lots of resource and material and support there. And it's super accessible. So we're doing that. everyone that's sort of been doing it last year is sort of jumping in, and we're doing that. So that would be where I'd point people to if they want to sort of get involved with
you
anything.
do any kind of online coaching or something? I mean, man, I love what you were telling me about my tattoos, and if people could get a hold of you and maybe do a coaching session,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
shoot you some money.
Yeah, so the idea is the community is set up so people can be going through this stuff, and I'm in there every week, putting in, like, doing calls and putting up lectures, and the podcast has extra content in there, and we're all sort of doing it together. That's what's happening in there, and so I think that's like in the States it's like $40 for the month type of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
And every week you're in there going through your stuff, because it's kind of long form what you're doing. Whereas for one-on-one stuff, usually if I'm doing a consult with someone, that they can like book me for an hour or two, and I can do what we're doing now if they need it. But you can probably do most of it in that community space. And then if someone's gone through the material in the community, which is like the old course and stuff, and they're an artist, we have a handful in the community. There's like a different layer in the community for artists. So if they understand the material, so they can have some one-on-one in terms of what they're doing with people, that's like more of the like coaching mentor sort of side comes in, where it's just like trying to help other artists work out what they're doing as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have a feeling my guy's gonna get a hold of you. Like he's kind of on the same journey, and so I love it, man.
Yes.
Wonderful conversation. Go ahead. You were gonna say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, in terms of your artist, there's no guidance. So this is part of it. It's like, who do you talk to? It's like, I've been pulling strings together, and it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good structure to help you work out what's happening. Right. So that's what it's there for.
I'll be sending this to him. Guarantee he's going to watch, and you're going to get an extra client out of the deal. Man, this was a fun conversation. Literally the best one I've had in a long time. So I really appreciate you. And you're the man. Keep doing what you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to chat with us and share your expertise, buddy.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you too, man.